I did, and then I have a house full right now for Joey's birthday.
Very quick. How did it go Sunday?
Oh, it's fun. It was hot, but
How did
it
it go?
was
Good.
fun. It was hot.
We are working on the live stream here. As soon as it gets in, we will start. What do we have? Oh, thank you very much. I will not forget. Why is this not starting?
I don't know. We're moving around.
Lori, you're
Oh, that's.
All right. I will unmute, and then if you want to call the order.
All right.
All
Mrs. Bergen,
Here.
Mrs. Schroeder,
Here.
Mr. Medina,
Here.
Mrs. Grove, Mrs. Lammel,
Here.
Mrs. Lebudzik,
Here.
here.
and Mrs.
And
Petropoulos, absent.
Okay, pledge of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Introduction of guests.
We have Mrs. Megan Nothnagel, our curriculum director, in the audience. So thank you for being here.
Wonderful. Anyone here for public presentation? Okay.
3.0, potential board action to approve voucher number 1036 in the amount of $93,275.18. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Mrs. Schroeder?
Here.
Mr. Medina? We're doing good.
It's okay.
It's hot.
Mrs. Grove?
Aye.
Mrs. Lammel?
Aye.
Mrs. Lebudzik?
Aye.
And Mrs. Birkin?
Aye.
4.0, Worth Township Treasurer's Office Trustee, House Bill 0305.
Yes, and I'm going to turn that over to Kathy to talk about that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so last week, the governor signed a bill that was proposed. It's House Bill 305. And what it does, it mandates all school districts to leave our current township treasurer's office. And my thought process of why, I see tears are looking like why. The township does a fabulous job for us. They do a lot of our financial reporting. They do our W-2s. They do a lot of behind the scenes. The biggest thing they do is invest our fund balances. And this law was proposed because right now the only thing is changing is how the township is governed. Because right now, all of the trustees, they are certainly Worth Township residents, but they don't have, let's say, a connection to the district that the township works with. So the mandate gives all school districts two options. We can leave and go out on our own, which I don't think we have the staff to do. And again, they really do a nice job for us. Or we would have to stay with them and we would basically just sign our own trustee. So by the end of this process, because it is a process, because the current trustees have to roll off, and then at the end, the Worth Township Treasurer's Office would be governed by 12 different trustees based on all of the schools that they represent.
Yeah, and so the biggest thing with this, and I do completely agree with Kathy, they've done a really nice job. We get a good return on our investment consistently. So I do recommend that we stay with them. But the second part of that is then we have to have a trustee from our district be on the new board for them. And that can be the superintendent, that can be the CSBO, or that can be any board member. I think they meet 3 times a year.
I believe they meet quarterly.
Quarterly on the third Monday, or it's on a Monday.
It is, I believe it's the first Monday, but keep in mind that can always change. Mhm.
Yeah, so I'm sure Kathy will do it if we want her to. It's usually at like 6 o'clock or something. But if any board member is interested, we do have to name someone tonight. because we then have to put that name forward, so they can start bringing that forward together.
All right, are we paying the township to do that?
We do, we do. We actually pay quarterly and we do present it on our financials. Roughly, it's about $17,000 a quarter. So about $70,000 for their services. And then if you remember, our income for our fund balances was probably over $700,000. So there is a fee because obviously they have their staff, but well worth the investment.
And we think this came from, a lot of the northern and western and like far south, like districts wanting the ability to step away, like they were having trouble with them. Whereas most people in the south suburbs have been pretty happy. I know we have been, like everyone in our kind of conglomerate is planning on staying in, just because they've gotten us such a good return.
Say we do nominate Kathy to do it, would there be like a stipend for that?
No, it would just be part of,
Part of her.
yeah. She loves nothing more than going to board meetings.
Well, we won't be paying the almost 60,000.
No, you would still,
Yeah.
so nothing would change
Mhm.
other than the fact that you would now have a board overseeing.
Representative.
Yes. Mhm.
All right, so my question is, so the trustee, so how many trustees are on it now? Do we know?
I do not.
Okay, so the trustees are like us, the staff, I guess my question is, so the staffing is all gonna be the same, so all these
Yes.
investments and the things like that, those people are still there, they're just having us have a voice technically.
Exactly.
They're not changed, so it will not change what they're really doing for us and everything like that, it's just the governing board of what's happening.
Exactly.
Okay.
So Terry LaBella is the Worth Township treasurer.
Okay.
He's the guy that signs our checks and that will not change. And then he will have his support staff to do their magic on their end.
What would be the
Mhm.
alternate option?
That would be to remove ourselves from the township. It would take a lot of additional staff. I would say probably at least like one or two, to process our payroll, to do the back end things. But honestly, it's,
Don't
like,
do it.
it's Terry's level. I have my master's in investments, but I haven't touched it in probably 30 years. And he has proven himself to be very, very good at it. So we could always hire, let's say, a PMA. You know, we could go, PMA is the company we use when we go out for bonds. It's a financial company. So there is an opportunity where you could hire a third party, you know, to do something like that. But I think with the township, because there's so many districts involved, you get the economies of scale. $70,000 wouldn't even, you know, pay for, you know, a staff member and a half to do that.
They're doing the W-2s, they're doing all that kind of stuff, and we don't have, I mean, we would have to bring on another staff member to even to do just the daily grind
Mhm.
and to do the investment, you know what I mean? Like, I agree with you on that. The other thing is, does Worth, I don't remember, does Worth Township do all the 941 reporting?
They
for us
do.
too?
They
It's a
do.
huge thing.
All the
all
quarterlies.
Quarterly and payroll
Mhm.
stuff that has to be done to the state of Illinois, FUTA, SUTA, all that other type of stuff, they're doing that too.
And what's really nice about that, all those things that Tiers are mentioning, they have one person that does that for 12 different districts. So you are benefiting from one person that knows how to do a 941. And then there's one person that does the TRS in the IMRF. And they're virtual specialists in those areas.
So is this something, sorry, I have a quick question. Now, will we have to vote on this annually? Like, once we vote on this to do this or whatever, will we have to continue to vote on having this trustee? Or say something goes sour and we have an issue where we're like, this is becoming a problem. Can this be dialed back? I hope it never does, but I just wanted to know if that is something.
Good question, and I know with I believe the trustee is for 2
It
years.
is, that
There's definitely
position.
a position. And I believe that if I'm reading it correctly, that you could vote at any time and say we had a fight to even have the option of staying with the township. They were trying to say like, nope, everyone has to basically like leave the township. So we fought to have that option, so I can't imagine it would be a problem if at one day that we did want to leave.
Okay, that's what I was
What's
just,
these poor districts gonna do?
I
I mean, if they were forced to leave,
And
they would
that's
not
the
be able
argument.
to, they'll be earning what, 0.1 0.5% of savings on their, on a savings account. Because their portfolio is gonna be worth crap. Do you know what I mean? By putting it with everybody else, they're earning a better,
They
you know
are.
what I mean? I just,
Mhm.
it makes you, I wanna know what the thought was, why to let people leave, like, what's the benefit? Yeah,
I just think there are some that are not doing the work that the Worth Township has done for their districts, and they feel stuck, and they wanted a way to get out of that, so.
but shame on the school districts for not doing something and having to go to a law to do it. You know what I mean? You have a voice. You're a member of a thing.
Has there been any more talk about dismembering the township? Quite a few years ago, I heard that they were talking about, removing the township
Mhm.
from local government. Have you heard anything more?
I have not, but I do remember that was about 8 years ago or so. And I believe that was because of mismanagement. So I don't know if maybe, moving forward, it's a better process. They're doing what they should be doing, but I have not heard that.
So I guess the question, this is just, we'll vote on it later, but just wanted to see if there is anyone who is interested in doing that position other than Kathy.
Kathy, do you want to do it?
I didn't say if you're interested.
Well, I'd be happy to. Mhm. But of course, if any board member would like to do it, that would be fine.
Would that mean that you come in later that day?
No, I would not, but.
I think that was my question too, just like, I know we were kind of scaling back a little bit of the stuff, so I wasn't sure of adding something else to your.
Oh, and I really appreciate that. This is, I think, just a transition. It really, really runs itself. So.
Envision that meeting being 45 minutes.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. But I appreciate that. Thank you.
Put in your mind, make sure.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Next up, we have 5.0, the Eisenhower Cooperative Construction Financing. We have talked quite a bit about this. We have already approved the bylaws to move this forward. We actually had enough districts who went ahead and approved that, so it is moving forward. Then the only thing that we did not do, we discussed paying, our part is $1,752,186. We talked in our open session about paying that upfront because we have the money to do that and we don't want to incur the finance charge, but we will ask tonight to vote on that. Just because this project is going to take a while, we're hoping ground will break in May with students in that classroom by August of 2026. So we obviously have board elections coming up. I hope people will run and we'll continue to move forward, but just in case people in the future, well, how did you decide that? We want to have that as a voted item on the agenda. So any questions on that one? All right. 6.0 is the potential board action to post for a first reading, the following board policies. These are about as straightforward as you can have. They're all regarding Title IX. And actually, Laura had asked a very good question earlier. So what is the change? And in all honesty, our admin team is going through Title IX training in a couple weeks. So I will have a lot more information then. They have been working on this, I swear, since like I started in education at the federal level. But the biggest change, the biggest difference, just to sum it up, is that Title IX really just focused on complaints of sexual harassment. This is expanding that out to also include sexual discrimination. I will find out exactly what that means in our training, but that is the big thing. Okay, all right. Was it great? Yeah. They are doing a Zoom call with all of us for an hour, and then they are recording a 15-minute presentation for our staff that would have to know that. So they'll be getting that at one of our PD times. So
What kind of staff did that?
that would be everybody. Yeah, everyone has to. We get a separate one because we have to have complaint managers like Kathy and Carrie Hilligans who just need some different training. But yes, they're very excited. You definitely can. I don't know if it's included in, I'm sure they've already got it interwoven in your required trainings, but it will probably change moving forward. So it's one of those things the state says you're required to do this, but we don't have everything figured out yet. So,
I can show you what I did, if they can't, if you want that. Loads of fun.
I'll make a motion.
Oh, yeah, we need a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Laura? Mr. Medina, Mrs. Grove, Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin, Mrs. Schroeder, and Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye. 8.0, 7.0,
If we can make Kathy do that.
potential board action to approve Kathy to be our Worth Township Treasurer's Office
I make a motion.
trustee.
I make a motion.
Okay, we have Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
Mrs. Birkin, Mrs. Schroeder,
Aye.
Mr. Medina, Mrs. Grove, and Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye, and a big fat thank you, Kathy. 8.0, potential board action to approve payment entirety to the Eisenhower Co-op in the amount of $1,752,186 for classroom building addition.
I'll second it.
I'll second it.
We have Mrs. Birkin, Mrs. Schroeder, Mr. Medina, Mrs. Grove, Mrs. Lammle,
Aye.
and Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
All right, we are looking to adjourn to closed session for the purpose, discussion of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee of the public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with the Open Meetings Act as defined in the Open Meetings Act, Section 2C1. The discussion of collective negotiating matters between the public body, its employees or representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees as defined in Section 2C2. Right, Mrs. Schroeder, Mr. Medina, Mrs. Grove, Mrs. Lammle, Mrs.
Aye.
Birkin, and Mrs. Lebudzick.
Aye.
Right, you're going